chapter 27, verse 6, and the daughters of Tzlafchad have brought their law before Moses, and so they want to know if they can inherit the land. Chapter 27, verse 6 of the book of Bamidbar. So God spoke to Moshe, and he says, Cain benos Tzlafchad bros. The daughters of Tzlafchad are speaking properly. Nason titeim lahem achuzas nachala besoch achei aviem va'avartas nachlas avien lahem. He said, the daughters of Tzlafchad are speaking properly. You shall give to them an inheritance amongst the brothers of their father, meaning in their tribe, and you shall cause the inheritance of their father to be passed over to them. By the way, you hear in the background, you hear fireworks all day. But the question I was wondering was, there was tremendous fireworks last night. And I was thinking, why are there fireworks last night? July 4th is the day. And so then somebody gave me the answer. It's because the cities around Washington, they don't want to overshadow the national fireworks. So they do it on July 3rd, so as not to overshadow. And my wife says that sounds like something straight out of the Talmud. How a custom developed that do something outside of Jerusalem and then in Jerusalem, so as not to embarrass Jerusalem. Like that's why you read it, the Megillah on one day and not the other day. It's like real life sociological practices in real life in real time. That's a great logic. That's okay. So that was a break from the verse. So the daughters of Tzlafchad spoke correctly, and they're going to get an inheritance. Rashi tells us, Kitar Gumo, the word Cain means Ya'ut, properly. So Cain, Benot Tzlafchad Davrot, the daughters of Tzlafchad are speaking properly. Nason Titen Lahem, God is surely giving to them. So wait, Rashi tells us, Cain Ksuva Parsha Zu Lefanai B'Marom. This is the passage written before me on high. On high. Magid Sharasa Inan Mashlo Rasa Inu Shamosha. Wow. So the daughters of Tzlafchad said, thus is the passage written before me on high. God said, that's the way I have it written in my text up here. So the daughters of Tzlafchad saw with their eyes that which Moses had not seen. Wow, so the daughters of Tzlafchad outshone Moses in this one area. Isn't that amazing? They weren't even prophets. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest human being to ever live. And yet the daughters of Tzlafchad were better than him on this one point. That's an amazing idea. We have to just stop and absorb that. So each of us have the ability to reach a tremendous potential in one area if we focus on it, or we can have an insight that can be incredible, even if we're not obviously, we're not going to be as great as a prophet like Moshe, but we can have a tremendous insight. And that's what the verse says. Cain b'no Tzlafchad dovros. The daughters of Tzlafchad speak properly. Yafet havu. They claim correctly. Ashrei Adam shakadosh baruch hu model advarav. They claim correctly. Fortunate is the person who God confirms his words. Can you imagine if we had merited that God said, Cain, Shmuel Dover? Wow. Then God says, the verse says, Nason titein lahem achuzas nachla. God will give to them a possession of inheritance. Shnei chalakim, you'll give them two portions, because it says naton titein, which is double portion. Chelak avien shaya miyotze Mitzrayim v'chalko imachiv b'nichsei chefer. And also, so here he's saying that he gets the portion of their father who was among those who went out of Egypt. And his portion along with his brothers b'nichsei chefer, in the property of chefer. So here is a little bit confusing because Rashi earlier says that the whole thing was subdivided, and so this seems to be slightly contradictory. But the commentaries discuss that. But in any event, Rashi is saying they're going to get the portion of their father, and the portion he got from his father. Chefer. Okay, then the verse states, you shall pass over the inheritance of their father to them. What does that mean? Rashi says, V'avarta is lashon evrahu. It means, it's related to the word wrath. If somebody does not have a son to inherit him, God is calling that a wrath. Well, I don't know about that. There's a phrase. You tell me if you ever heard this. Jeffrey only has sons, no daughters, right, Jeffrey? What do you, Larry? You have daughters, or you have a son, right?
Both.
You have a son and daughter. You ever hear the expression? There's an expression that if you have a daughter, she's your daughter for life. You have a son, it's till he finds a wife.
Right.
You heard that?
Very true. Very true.
Well, I mean, it's perhaps true in some cases and perhaps not true in other cases. But the point is, maybe the rabbis are protesting here too much. Okay. Davar acher, alternatively, al shem Shabbos na'averes nachala. Why is it called vavarta? Because the daughter causes the inheritance to pass over mishevet l'shevet, because she causes the inheritance to pass, to go from one tribe to another, because it's not going to be like this for the first generation, because Slavkad's daughters were only allowed to marry into the tribe of Menashe, but the next generations, if the daughter inherits her father and then she marries somebody from a different tribe, then the land will pass from one tribe to another tribe. Because her son and her husband inherit her, and her son is from a different tribe. Because the idea that the daughters of Tzlafad could not marry somebody from a different tribe, that was only for that generation alone. And all of them it says you shall pass. In all of them it says you shall give, but by a daughter it says that you shall pass over. Okay, Rashi says, next verse.
Rabbi?
Yes, Rabbi Yosef.
We're not talking about emails and matchmakers, so how would they even know somebody from another tribe in those days?
I once learned this question the hard way. From my mother when I was a little boy.
Okay.
There was one camp that I went to, one summer camp, where the boys and the girls, their campuses were like 15 feet away from each other. And there was another camp that the boys and the girls were like a mile apart. And then somebody was talking. I remember this conversation distinctly. I was like a 7 or 8 year old boy. And the other camp, it's in one camp where they were 15 feet apart. The boys used to talk to the girls. And on the other camp, I heard the people talking. And they said, yeah, the boys and the girls, they talk a lot there. And I said to my mother, how do they talk? They're like a mile away. And my mother looks at me and she says, they find a way. They send smoke signals. They figure it out. The Gemara tells us that if there's a rooster, he can smell out a hen anywhere in the vicinity.
Yeah, but that was after the time of the judges. Before the judges, before they were allowed to marry into the other tribes, I just don't see how they would have even met each other.
Yeah. How did Romeo meet Juliet? Okay.
They're both dead, Rabbi.
Yeah, okay. Next verse, verse 8. Now, Bnei Yisrael to daber lemor, the children of Israel, you shall speak, saying, Ish ki yamut uben ein lo. If a man will die and he'll have no son, vavartem enachato avito, you pass over the inheritance to his daughter. The man lo bat, if he has no daughter, hold on. The man lo bat, you give it to his brother. If he has no brother, you give it to his father's brother. to the brothers of his father. And if he has no brothers, for his father, if there are no brothers to his father, give his inheritance to his relative who's closest to him of his family, and he gets it. This was a law for the children of Israel. So basically, if a man dies, he has no sons, it goes to the daughters. If he has no daughters, you give it to his brothers. If he has no brothers, you give it to his father's brothers, to his uncles. And if he has the brothers, then you give it to the relative who's closest. Who's that? It doesn't tell us. Okay, so let's see what Rashi says. Nothing. Only to the father's side. You don't give it to the mother's relatives. You don't give it to the mother's relatives. Okay. Okay, now we have a very beautiful passage. A very beautiful passage. Beautiful. Vayomer Hashem Moshe. God says to Moshe, "Alei al har ha'avarim hazeh." Go up to the mountain of Avarim. See the land that I'm giving to the children of Israel. V'ra'isa usa. You shall see it. Okay, we did two verses. We have to look at the Rashi. You'll see the land, and then you'll die, just like Aaron, your brother, died. So God is telling him, go up to the mountain and look out at the land, and then you'll die. I always, one time, what? I'm never there.
I was there. It's beautiful.
In Jordan.
Yeah, beautiful.
Did you find Moses' burial plot?
No,
No,
I didn't.
the Torah says nobody can find it. Yeah, Aaron's spot, they know, but Moses, you can't find it. Moses, you can't find it.
For good reason.
But somebody once told me when I first became a rabbi and I was like getting involved in like something really, there's nothing beneath me, obviously, but my friend was trying to tell me that a rabbi shouldn't be involved in the weeds to that degree. And he said to me, meaning like to say I was getting upset about something I shouldn't have gotten upset about. And he tried to give me Dvar Torah. And he said to me, Dvar Torah was, why did Moshe Rabbeinu not go into the land of Israel? Because then he would have gotten involved in the trees. And he stood up on the mountain and he had the vision, he had the big vision. And that's why he says, you have to have the big picture, is what he was trying to tell me. Always remember the big picture. Larry's skeptical, but.
On the other hand,
After 40 years, not gonna let you in.
Well, let's see what Rashi, I see what you're saying, but you know what? After 40 years, if he could have gone in, he should have gone in.
it's 120th time to change. That's what beat by, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah. So he says, God says to Moshe, what does the Rashi say? Why is this passage next to, this is a beautiful Rashi. Why is this passage next to the daughters of Tzlafchad? God said, surely you'll give them an inheritance. Moshe says, well, God had told me to give out the lands. Maybe just like the daughters of Tzlafchad got a portion, maybe I'm going to get a portion and I could go into the land. God says, no, you're not going to go in. My decree stands in its place. Wow. So Moses thought maybe he had an opening. It must have been so hard to hear this, the people keep asking for an inheritance to give out the land, and he doesn't do it. But alternatively, Moshe once Moshe was able to come he's on the other side of the Jordan, so he's technically as part of the division. He was with Reuven and Gad. He says, well, it seems to me that my vow has been released because I've come into their land. Mashal and Melech, it's a parable to a king, Shegazar al Beno, decreed upon his son, Shelo Yikanes, Pesach Poatin Shelo. He decreed that he can never enter into his palace. Nichnas l'sha'ar, he entered into the gate. V'hu acharav, his son followed him. The king entered into the gate. The son followed him. L'chatzer, he goes into the courtyard. V'uacharav. The son follows him into the courtyard. L'trakon, he comes into like the lobby, and the son follows him. He's about to enter the bedroom. Amaro b'ni mikam va'elach ata asor likanes. He said, he says, from here on you can't enter. So he tells his son. So yeah, he told his son, you can't go into the palace. The son keeps going. He tries to get into the bedroom, and the king says, you've gone far enough. So Moses, Hashem keeps telling Moshe, you have a little bit more, but not into the bedroom.
Okay. Well,
The rabbis are the best with their parables.
They had a sense of what's appropriate.
Yeah. So then the next verse says, the Rashi says, Kasher na'asaf Aaron achicha, like your brother Aaron was brought in. Mikan shenisava Moshe misaso shel Aaron. Moses desired to die like Aaron died. Davar acher, ein ata tov mimenu. Alternatively, you are not better than he. God's telling Moses, you're no better than Aaron. Because you did not sanctify me. But if you had sanctified me, if you had sanctified me, you would still be in this world. Wherever the Torah writes about the death of Moses and Aaron, kasav surchanam, it writes their sin, because in the next verse it's going to recite their sins. Why does it have to say their sins? Because there was a decree made against the generation of the wilderness, to die in the wilderness, because they did not believe. So therefore Moses says, I want you to write my sin. Moses prayed to God to write his sin. You don't want him to say that he also was of the rebellious ones. This is a parable to two women who were flogged in the court. So there were two women who were being, this is a parable to two women who were being lashed by the court. One was being lashed because she was adulterous. The other one was being lashed because she ate from the fruits of the sabbatical year. They're both offenses, but one is more embarrassing. It's more embarrassing to be adulterous. And so therefore, the one who was being flogged for eating the fruits said, please be sure to tell everybody what my sin is so people don't think I was adulterous. Moses says, please mention my sin so you don't think that I did the other sin of the Jewish people, that I did this sin.
Okay. It also does raise the question, if we hadn't had the scene here, we would still be trying to figure out what's so bad about what Moses did.
Well, that's what he said. Kasher Meritem, verse 14, Kasher Meritem pi b'mebartzin. God said, you rebelled against my word in the sin wilderness, b'mrivat ha'edah, like in the strife of the congregation, like tisheni b'mayim leineim. Hey, meimi rivas kadesh min bartzin. That's where you strode against me at the waters of Kadesh in sin. Rashi says, hey muvadam, this alone is their sin. Ein b'hem avon acher. There's no other sin. Devar acher, heim she'emru b'mara. They are the ones who had the rebellion. They're what led to the rebellion at Marah. Heim she'emru b'yamsuf. They're what led to the rebellion of Yamsuf. Heim atzmam she'emru. They're the midbar sin. What does this mean exactly? Meaning to say, their lack of faith led them to sin. The lack of trust of God is what caused them to sin in all these areas. Okay, now we go on to the next verse. Hold on one second. Okay, the next paragraph talks about God asking Joshua to take over for Moses. Because what does it say? Vayidaber Moshe Hashem, one more Moshe spoke to Hashem saying, he's going to ask for somebody to take over for him. So Rashi says, this is to tell us about the praiseworthiness of the righteous. Because it doesn't say God spoke to Moses. Here, Moses spoke to God. Moses is going to pray for a successor. Moses was about to die. He doesn't engage in his own needs. He puts that aside and he says, let's do what the community needs. Yifkod Hashem Elokei Aruchos L'Kol Basar. Can Hashem appoint Yifkod Hashem Elokei Aruchot, a man of spirits of all flesh, or actually Elokei Aruchot L'Kol Basar, God of the spirits of all flesh. Appoint appoint a man, Ish Alaida, let God appoint a man over the community. It's a very strange, unusual reference to God. Well, anyway, Lemor Rashi says, Moshe said, Hashiveni matam manel and parnei simlav. Can you answer me if you're going to appoint him a leader? Kiven sheshama Moshe shamar makom te nachot slafa of notav. Rashi says, once Moses heard that God said, give Tzlafchad's inheritance to his daughters, he said, Higia sha'ah she'et bat tzaracha. He says, the moment has come when I should claim my needs. The moment has come that I should claim my needs. Because what are my needs? Sheyirshu banayas keduati. I want my sons to inherit my position. This is such a painful Rashi. God says to him, that's not my thought. See, Moshe says, I want my Tzlafchad's daughters can inherit. I want my children to inherit. God says, no. Do you know how hard that must be for a human being to say it to another one? Your kids are no good. He says, Joshua is going to get the reward for serving you. Because he never left your tent. This is what Solomon said, Notzer te'ina yochal pirya. The one who guards the figs will eat its fruit. So Moshe wanted his children to take over. How many times do children take over, but they don't have, God doesn't tell the parent, it's not going to work. Very,
Rashi is quoting the Midrash, but
yeah.
The pshat doesn't make any sense because, like, he knew that they weren't worthy.
Where does it say that? Hello, John, my dear friend.
Well, what we quoted yesterday, that his great-grandson was
yeah, but the
was a
pshat,
Levite who worshipped idols.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that in the literal. Here, take this, John. It doesn't say that in the literal text. We're in chapter 27, verse 17. So
Moses' son.
Moses' sons were not in Egypt, but they joined him in Parashas Yisrael. So, no, it says he takes his wife and two children, takes his daughter and their two children. So he tried to bring them, according to Rashi, he tried to bring them into Egypt, and Aaron sent them away. So you have to say that they weren't part of the Exodus. They were kids who were not part of the Exodus. So they didn't get the street cred, so to speak. They weren't part of the national, it would be like somebody who wasn't part of the revolution leading the people. They didn't have their shared experience. So then Rashi says, why is he called the God of the spirits? He says, God, you know everybody's personality. Nobody's like each other. Appoint over them a manhig, a leader who can put up with each individual according to his personality. This is the that's not so easy. That's a tough job. To be the leader of the Jewish people is a tough job. I know somebody once told me this person was the chief of staff in the Israeli highest levels, may have been the chief of staff to the prime minister or to the defense department. Or actually, he is the ambassador he was the chief of staff and then he was the ambassador to the United States. And he used to daven with us at Ohev Shalom. And he told me that being the prime minister of Israel is the toughest job in the world. I mean, he hasn't seen every job, but he said it was incredibly difficult. Oh, Niv, Shammai, we're going to study the Daf Yomi tonight, Niv, right?
I think we have to go home early.
Oh, no. Shammai is going to study with us. Yes, Jerry had a question.
Yes, the job of rabbi is one of the toughest jobs. Half the congregation likes him and the other half hates him.
I've been a rabbi for since 2000, and I think it's one of the greatest jobs in the world. I think that certainly you shouldn't go into the job if you want to be popular, but I would not call it one of the toughest jobs in the world. I think that there are a lot harder jobs. My nephew was a commando in the Israeli Defense Forces. I think that's much harder.
It's the toughest job you'll ever love.
Well, if you
Military slogan.
no, if you find something you have to do, you'll never have to work a day in your life. You ever hear that expression? And anyway, we'll give Jeff the last word. We cut him off before.
I said, Golda Meir was so sad. Talked to the special president, talked how difficult it was. She said, well, in the United States, there's only one president. In Israel, everybody was president.
Yeah, well, that's also true. That's also Shammai grew up in Israel, so. But the truth is,
Yeah.
what'd you say?
He was president of Israel.
Yeah, he was the one time in his life.
Wait, would not?
But the problem is,